I knew of your existence since your birth. Every action in your life, every girl that dumped you, every inconvenience that befell you, every time you've watched anime because you've had no friends to play Smash with, every time you've been clickbaited by a no one understands thumbnail, despite the amount of times they tell you it's not on a pretentious level, it's just that no one understands that character, as I will come to explain. Their point of the character is to not be understood. And every big event that's happened in your entire life was all part of my master plan, leading you to this very moment of clicking on this very video. So now, let's say after that very awesome intro that I've devised, you immediately clicked off the video. Not gonna lie, all those years of planning and devising stratagems to get you here would have been pretty much not only wasted, but sort of counterproductive, since YouTube cares about watch time, and if you clicked off right now, it would screw me over. That's the feeling a lot of people got when Ichigo defeated Aizen. Aizen planned out his entire life, since his birth, pitting obstacles against him to make him as powerful as possible to be a proper final opponent that Aizen will inevitably defeat before fighting the Soul King, because he's so awesome and stuff. Now, this was one of his master plans, and he lost everything in that fight. Very cool, Aizen. Very cool. Now, I start the video bringing up this point because this is the single most criticized detail in Aizen's character writing. People would have preferred it if, let's say, Ichigo was an unforeseeable anomaly in Aizen's grand plan and would have eventually defeated him, as opposed to someone who only got to this level of strength because of Aizen, who was an essential mastermind, but then his own strategy defeated him. Not only will I be proving that wrong in this video, and that's part of Aizen's great character writing, but if Aizen wouldn't have ever noticed him and noticed him growing in power, that would have been a flaw in Aizen's character, because as we know, Shinji knew Aizen since he was in his mother's womb, so Aizen should have definitely known about Ichigo. I do understand why people were pissed off about it though. To explain people's distress, imagine if Danzo from Naruto really killed all the Uchiha as part of his secret plan to make Sasuke want revenge, get Ultra Eyeballs, and then the eventual plan was to steal the Ultra Eyeballs. I understand that was not the case, and Danzo is not nearly that smart, but imagine if he would have done so, and then that very guy with those very Ultra Eyeballs would have destroyed him. Yes, it would have indeed been very lame. Now, I bring Danzo as an example to this, and not a very good one, because that's not the situation that even unfolded, because if that's what would have happened in Danzo's scenario, it would have been terrible character writing. Whereas, despite the claims against Aizen, my own included, before heavily researching this video, I now love Aizen's character in its entirety. I love his rise to power, I love his fall of power, and I love his character after his fall of power as well. He's become my top 5 favorite shonen villains ever. I've said it before, but for me, the absolute highlight of making these videos is that I come to love characters that I've hated prior to making them. This moment that killed Aizen's character for many people now, in my mind, makes him a far stronger, more human and relatable character, ridiculous as that sounds. I'm just lucky that I'm a borderline insane psychological mad lad that I can somehow relate to all these psychos. No, and I don't think it says absolutely anything about my personality. This is not one of those lolly porn equals pedophile type situations, because even though I can find myself relating to the twisted minds of all the psychopaths, it doesn't make me a psychopath. Although granted, it does sometimes scare the freaking hell out of me. Let me know in the comments if by the end of this video you can find yourself relating to him as well, because as far as anime analysis, I believe that to be one of my strengths. And also, I feel like it would be sort of comforting confirmation that I'm not absolutely insane and only partially insane. So hey, there's that too. Pretty dope. Laying the groundwork, Aizen is a rather ambitious fellow. For the entirety of his tale up to his villain reveal, he was amassing knowledge and power with his ambitions that this 100-year-long plan would eventually lead him to success in becoming the most powerful being in the universe. It is to be noted that it was during his tenure as a captain of the Soul Society that he went to Las Noches and subjugated Baragan, in turn taking control of the entire Hueco Mundo. It was stated that every Hollow will bow their heads to Aizen's absolute rule because Aizen simply has absolutely no fear and no emotional weaknesses. Because the essence of what Hollows are, as it's stated, a normal person will become a whole, but the ones with psychological baggages will transform into Hollows. So since Hollows by definitions are beings created out of fear and psychological issues, a person like Aizen, whose mind absolutely controls his emotional state, and who was 100% cerebral as opposed to visceral, it was something unattainable to Hollows by default of their existence, and they therefore were overwhelmed by him and were enthralled by him. While I do believe this says something crucial about the psychology of Hollows altogether, and I would like to maybe expand on it in a future video, think about what this says about Aizen. Hollows craved powers just like Hollows craved lack of psychological ineptitude, and Aizen had both. In their eyes, Aizen was perfect. Now, we're all aware of Kurotsushi's little speech about perfection, especially because it's my favorite speech in the entirety of Bleach. Yeah, I know, that little speech discussing how perfection is impossible and why imperfection is actually a good thing. Now, that speech that I've listened to countless times applies to everything, and I will get back to it. As he said, to the average man, perfection has an infatuation to it, even though it's ultimately unattainable. So with that in mind, it's not just the Hollows that are looking up to Aizen as a perfect being, but let's not forget Aizen's goal is along those lines as well. Aizen isn't your average person, and I doubt he believes perfection is possible, but Aizen's goal nonetheless is to be the single being closest to perfection in existence. And like Kurotsushi said, the moment that you consider yourself perfection is the moment you've lost. Hell yeah, I have a dope Kurotsushi voice. No one asked you, shut up please. You know, you're basically asking me to start making videos in a Kurotsushi voice just to annoy you, right? Had to nip that one in the bud. But back to Aizen, he was a guy destined for greatness. Shinji mentioned that he had an eye on Aizen since he was in his mother's womb. There's no doubting that Aizen naturally possessed insane abilities. Combine that with a wicked intelligence and a thirst for supreme power, and you get a very immoral bastard who just doesn't care about the means to accomplish his goals. Now, absolutely nothing is beneath his level of dignity to progress in the most effective fashion possible. And as one of my favorite examples of this, look at chapter 213 for a moment. Grimmjow just returned after acting on his own and entering the human world. Now, Aizen said very little in this conversation, but his presence was ridiculous. Grimmjow disobeyed him and was disrespectful, so Tosen wanted to execute him. So, of course, the benevolent-seeming Aizen prevented him to do so, where Grimmjow can retain his smugness. Wow, very cool, Aizen, very cool. But being that he was still all smug and disrespectful, Tosen cut off his arm, and Aizen told Grimmjow not to fight Tosen, or there would be no reason not to kill Grimmjow after all. After this conversation, Gin points out how manipulative Aizen was, pointing out that the only one who can actually get a read on Aizen is Gin, but also how powerful Aizen's psychological game is. In this little encounter, from Tosen's perspective, Aizen's still the great man that pardoned Grimmjow who disobeyed and disrespected him. Wow, Aizen's such a selfless dude. He's someone worth sacrificing my life for. From Grimmjow's perspective, Aizen does not care about him enough to get involved protecting him if he'd attack Tosen, and that if he'd step a toe out of line again and actually becomes more of a hassle than he's worth, he'd be eliminated without a second thought. The fact that he's a mere tool to Aizen was just etched in his mind, while to Tosen, that was pure benevolence, and to his subjects, the other Arankars, Grimmjow came out of this slight insubordination missing an arm. So obviously, Aizen felt bad about the 5 Arankars that died on Grimmjow's disobeying action, when in actuality, Aizen tells Gin at the end of that chapter how he couldn't care less about those 5. And it isn't stated, but that missing arm is perfect to test out Orihime's power later, which she only attained through his use of the Hokyoku, which is discovered a lot later. Now, there's something he couldn't tell Tosen, because here's the thing. Tosen serves Aizen because he believes in him. He believes him to be a higher level of justice, while Gin's a whole different bag of worms that I'll have to cover in a future video, because I love Gin. Do you realize that there were 6 totally different perspectives of Aizen's bare minimum actions in that chapter alone? And the chapter wasn't even focused on him. That's the essence of Aizen. No one has a read on him. And if I wanted to make this a 2-hour-long video going through every scene in Bleach, pointing out how Aizen's every action is perceived differently by everyone present, I kind of could do that. I just feel like pointing this out, you could see it everywhere else if you're looking for it, in everything he does. Even with Tosen and Gin, 2 fellow traitorous captains that allegedly have the same role. But Tosen sees Okay. Everything Aizen does as selfless benevolence, doing what he must do for the greater good. While to Gin, everything is a personal power play. I'm gonna point out why this is so integral to his character past the badass level in a moment, but first, I just have to give homage to potentially the greatest villain reveal in all of anime. At the end of the Soul Society arc, one of the best shonen arcs ever, the Aizen reveal tipped it over the edge as an unforgettable classic. That's somehow forgotten anyway, which basically takes the meaning out of the word unforgettable, but I digress. It's only at the absolute very end of this thoroughly fantastic arc that you realize everything went according to Aizen's plan. And it's not one of those Black Zetsu meme reveals that, of course it was all part of your plan because you said it was and I totally believe you. But Aizen faking his death in the middle of the arc, which of course would be casting aspersions that it was caused by the intruders, not to mention that's the only reason that the invaders actually appeared now, was all manipulated by Aizen. All the ruckus they set up, including defeating captains, made everything so much easier. And then the reveal reveal at the end that the only reason why Ichigo was strong enough to cause the commotion he did was because Aizen set up obstacles that got him to that point. He even set up Rukia to possess the Hokyuku, to weaken her that she'd lose to that hollow in episode 1, to give Ichigo power, which in turn would cause Rukia to get arrested, Ichigo to wreck the place, leading the Hokyuku right into his open hands. Aizen outsmarted everyone, including us viewers. He was a nobody nice guy captain who freaking got killed off screen. Who dies off screen? What a loser! He had the least presence of any captain, and even most lieutenants, by just the way he was regarded by his peers. Fam, this guy misdirected everyone, including us, big time, and had of the most epic anime reveals of all time. He waltzed through all these established powerhouses, defeating them instantaneously. When he fought Ichigo and Ichigo's theme started raining steam, he blocked the now powerful main character's sword strike with a finger, and Ichigo's theme halted dead in its tracks as well. This worked to show his might, but dicks out for that touch in the anime, bringing Ichigo's theme to a dead stop. It's not only great to set the mood and atmosphere of his insane strength, but subconsciously we understand that music and media is obviously not playing in the world of Bleach, but it's on a different plane of existence, created purely for us viewers to vibe with the goings-on in the story. Aizen destroyed Ichigo's theme, just like he destroyed us, fooling us in the narrative. His reach reaches higher than anyone else's. Now, what originally kept me from loving Aizen as a top-tier shonen villain was I felt like everything he did in the story itself was spectacular as far as antagonists go, but I never feel like we got to know Aizen. All of his layers of deception he stacked one on top of the other to fool everyone, making himself as perfect as possible, and never let us meet the real person behind all the layers. Cause Aizens are like onions. Okay, never mind. Now, one of two reasons for that. Either it's because of shallow writing. He was just some unstoppable force, super genius villain. No personality, but you know, he was an antagonist. He did his job well. Or it was absolutely spectacular character writing, and I just missed it the first time watching through Bleach. And honestly, at this point, I believe it's the latter. So now, we actually understand that the actions of Aizen and how it's not just brute force, but manipulation as well, all the while guising the mask of a different person when he's talking to different people. I feel like we never actually see Aizen himself until his defeat against Ichigo and Urahara, where he first loses his composure. Until that point, however, we're just stripping down layers of Aizen's mind. Past polite Captain Aizen, you get evil conniving Aizen. And even evil conniving Aizen can be stripped down further when you realize how little he cares about his subordinates, and how it's only the end goals that matter to him. Because, as I've mentioned, Aizens are like onions. Aizens have layers just like onions have layers. And if you're thinking right now, well, why didn't I compare Aizens to cake? Everyone loves cake. Well then, congratulations. You're a proud memeing member of the fan base. Touche to you. So now, let me ask you a bit of a philosophical question. What defines a man? Or woman? I'm not being sexist. It just sounds cooler to use man in that phrase. Sorry, fam women, but what defines a man? Is it how they feel inside, or what their actions are on the outside? On one hand, you can argue it's how they feel inside, because that's the genuine person, even if the disingenuous actions may delude you into thinking he's someone else. But on the other hand, you have a murderer who, he genuinely feels bad about killing so many innocent people. He's still a murderer, and that shouldn't make him considered a lovely human being. Notice how when I'm talking about murderers, I changed it from human being as opposed to saying man, because saying that only men are murderers is just sexist, and I will have none of that. Women can be murderers too, hashtag gender equality. But to answer that question, I guess I'd say it's a blend, somewhere in between. So Aizen, a guy manipulative to the extent that everyone thinks of him to be a different person depending on what Aizen wants them to think he is. Outwardly, I guess you could say he's an anomaly. His internal character cannot be understood by those that regard him in only a slice of time. As viewers, we're privy to watch this anime in 4 dimensions, as we have a bird's eye view on all of the anime's reality. So by merging all of the fake perceptions Aizen's casting, we can kinda grasp the person he actually is internally. And internally, I think he's fake. This is why I relate to him to such an insane extent. After researching him for this video, Aizen internally is nothing. And once it was too late, he figured that out too. His whole life, hundreds of years, spent purely for the purpose of becoming as close to perfection as he could. It's a goal that can only be attainable by stripping himself away in the process. Now, the fact that the Hollows revered him because he had no fear or negative emotional burdens, granted to Aizen, it makes him more perfect in his own eyes, but in reality, it removes humanity. Fears and negative emotional burdens are what crafts any person into who they are, and it helps them realize who they are. I know that personal negative emotional burdens made me a better person and a more genuine person in the long run, despite the fact that, yes, it's technically an imperfection in the eyes of an Aizen. My mom was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer a few years ago, and the doctor said she had no chance. For a bit, it destroyed me, and I changed a lot of my life outlook looks and how I treat life. Very, very long story short, a few months later, she made a full recovery, much to the doctor's perplexion. And even though I don't want to get into the mushy details, I never reflected on myself more than during that period of time. I made a bunch of really important life decisions, and I feel like I've become a better, stronger person because of it. Not that I would ever wish something that horrible upon anyone, and I still carry around that emotional burden to this day, but anyone that experiences tough emotional moments comes out different and crafts who they eventually become, for better or for worse. It allows people to become in-tuned into who they really are. An atheist only really knows if he's an atheist if he's in a life and death situation, because if he starts praying to God, he's not genuine. Maybe that was a bad example. I don't know. But it's the emotional downers in life that really teach you about yourself. Will you act selflessly or selfishly? Will you go commit a school shooting, or will you jump in front of the shooter? Now, I realize this seems like a bit serious of a tangent to the topic at hand, being an anime supervillain. But this is a person that every hollow looked up to because he had no fear and no emotional baggage. His whole life was focused on attaining perfection, so he molded himself into whatever would best service him in the long run. Is he the nice, kind-hearted Captain Aizen? Is he the ultimatum king of Las Noches? Or is he perhaps someone who was so goal-oriented, constantly shifting his outward appearance, with never having the emotional lows to self-reflect, that caused something sad to happen in his psychology? Aizen is someone who doesn't know anything about himself and doesn't even realize how much he's suffering for it. He thinks that what he internally wants is perfection, when really, he doesn't know the first thing about himself. Since we're here on YouTube, I'll use YouTube as a metaphor. Rule number 1 of YouTube for newcomers: never trust a YouTuber. I, as a YouTuber, have developed an ability to see through the garbage, and there's only a handful of people that I don't personally know that I actually do trust. But the issue is, YouTube is a platform where manipulation is the best way to make money. And I'm talking mostly personality channels like vloggers primarily. But since regular people are more boring than vlogger superhumans, they tweak their personality a lot. Now, the thing is, that happens to a lot of people here. It's since they're rewarded for this, it becomes an epidemic, and they're not happy because they no longer know who they are. That's the whole YouTube burnout, and celebrities are people too type things in a nutshell. Aizen is someone in far worse shape than any of that, because his life up until his defeat was without setback. So he completely adhered to the goal-oriented idea of perfection, where he, in the process, without realizing, destroyed his internal self. Let me ask you another philosophical question, and that is, what's the purpose of power? If someone's all-powerful but has no one to share that power with, is all that power genuinely meaningless? Is the thirst for power honestly a personal vested interest that can be quenched in solitude? Well, I guess it could be argued, but not really. The person Aizen fooled most, with all of his genuinely brilliant facades, accomplishing as much as possible, as fast as possible, is himself. Now, you may be thinking at this point that this is all speculation on my end, translating my own personal philosophy that everyone should know who they are and genuinely be themselves. That's why I end all my videos with "Stay weird, fam. It's good to be weird." But maybe I'm just translating that onto someone in Aizen's position and thereby relating to him, because I see myself as narrowly avoiding his psychological tragic predicament. But while even if that were the case, it would still make Aizen a fascinatingly, tragically written, utterly badass beast. No, I believe Aizen was written with these blueprints, which is why he's so beloved even after his fall. So now, let's discuss why, according to this outlook, from Aizen's perspective, his battle versus Ichigo was amazing. So the big gripe with the fight was, I'll repeat, after all his planning, he lost. And to add insult to injury, he was jovially flaunting his erection, stroking himself for making Ichigo as powerful as possible, since he had the most potential, and Ichigo will still lose! But the thing is, the Hokyoku is insanely powerful, and it knows what its user desires better than the user himself. And this is Aizen we're talking about. The guy who, for as all-knowing as he is, his one flaw that he doesn't even consider a flaw is that he doesn't know himself, and that's why he lost. It was stated that the Hokyoku, being as all-powerful as it is, knew that Aizen subconsciously wanted to lose, so therefore the result was he lost. I didn't make that up, that's actually stated. I also wanted to point out that Aizen at this point had a massive superiority complex as well. He didn't even use his Shikai against Ichigo, which would beat him because he was so confident that he didn't need it. I'm not coming to say that, look, Ichigo was actually secretly stronger than Aizen or anything like that. That's not my argument for why this fight was great. Aizen was way stronger than Ichigo. The Hokyoku is ridiculously strong. But since at this point, the Hokyoku taps into Aizen's subconscious desires, as opposed to the foreground of his personality becoming perfect, it sees that Aizen does not want to be perfect. Because as Kurotsuchi said, doubling back to that epic speech there, even if perfection
perfection was actually real, it would be terrible.
Yeah, I had to turn down the Oscar for that Korotsuchi impression, by the way. But yes, perfection is terrible. If there's perfect, there's no longer growth. And if there's no growth, there's depression. The number one cause of depression is people feeling a lack of growth and self-improvement or self-accomplishment. Perfection is a dead end, and even though it's impossible, even if it could exist, it would be tragic. Subconsciously, Aizen
Is no average man.
and he very much knew that. He also knew that he hated himself for what he was becoming a person that didn't know himself. Subconsciously, Aizen needed to pull himself back from perfection. If he would beat Ichigo and beat the Soul King and all that, he's all powerful with no one on his side, which means there's nothing to show for it, and there's nowhere to go from that point. Which is why Aizen, who retained his composure after his massive superiority complex from that fight, is absolutely epicness in the final arc of Bleach. I have a lot of issues with the final arc altogether. It was not my favorite arc, and I've said that several times, but my favorite part of that arc was undoubtedly Sosuke Aizen, a man that finally understood who he was. I don't really want to get into spoilers, because I know a lot of people have not read that arc, and you never know, Bleach might be getting an anime in like 2045. That would be pretty hype. So with all that said and done, I relate a hell of a lot to Aizen. I think people, especially with online personas that they could tweak to however they want, stray away from being a genuine person, and it's tragic. You've seen the videos I've been uploading. You see that my Naruto video get the most views, and you see that I'm still tweaking it, shifting around, back and forth, doing whatever I want. Not only that, but I'm not into the whole PC thing to get my video monetized and promoted, because that's just not who I am. Genuinely being yourself is such an important thing to understand in life, and I honestly feel bad for the people that, granted, are doing amazing financially with great reputations, but I feel bad for them if they're not themselves. It'll come to bite them in the ass, and I don't want to be there when that happens. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. In retrospect, this is one of my favorite videos I've ever made, so I would appreciate it if you shared it around. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe for more anime analyses, and honestly, I would really appreciate if as many people that liked Aizen or didn't like Aizen saw this video as possible, because it's an outlook no one has, but I honestly want everyone to have. So, link in the description to my Twitter. Feel free to follow me there. Link to my merch is also there, and link to my Patreon is there as well. What a lovely coincidence. So, I wanted to thank my patrons: Soy Boy Theories, Miriam Ramirez, Q, Fidges Hendrix, Praise Lord Dugirugameshu, Billy Thompson, Mitochondria, Nate, Sergeant Malarkey, Alan Weebus, Divine Reigns, Crazy Beat, Miku, Teakui, TM Philly, King Beat My Meat, Negus Nogus, Sage of Snake, Pop-Up, Grumpy Welshman, Wilson Fletcher, Team Sparky65, Lazy Donan, Girthy Worm Jim, Allison Stricker, JD Fincher, Cosine Pit Shifters, Elaser, Sash, Ethan Price, King Tank Games, and Frisky Dingo. I also wanted to thank the Lord Tweegarank, the true followers of Lord Tweego, Meezy Jeezy, Anthony Booth, Steelers, Large Blab, Cream My Pancake, Pooh Zerker, which is like Berserker, but it's even cooler because it's Pooh Zerker. I'm gonna get demonetized. I'm gonna get demonetized over that. Prella, Rari, MD, Santo Kiyomasa, Zindergarden, Emperor Misha, and Kyle the Warrior. Also wanted to thank the God Usopp rank, Burning Bush, Dark Element, Necro, Sunny Parks, James Patterson, Kaiser Wanar, and Maurice, Luis Dreyfus. But as kind of a meme, I made a Has Hashirama Cells rank, and Gremmin actually joined, so huge thank Gremmin, you have Hashirama Cells. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Put a lot of time into it, even though I know Bleach videos don't really get views nowadays. But I really wanted to say it. It was something that needed to be said. What could I say? Anyway, leave a like and stuff. I genuinely appreciate you being here. And remember, super important life lesson. Stay weird, fam.